The main hero of a story having a love interest is a story as old as time. Superman has Lois Lane, Spider-Man has Mary Jane, Anakin Skywalker has Padme, and over the years, Batman too has been paired with multiple different love interests. And the DCAU, in my opinion, shows us some of the best love interests that Batman has ever had. And that's why today we're talking top 5 Batman love interests in the DCAU. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Batman's top 5 love interests in the DCAU. He has multiple throughout this universe, and while I want to keep this as objective as possible, there will be a degree of my own opinion in this. However, for me, the basic parameters for this ranking list, how the relationship affects both characters, does it take away from each of their characters, or does it actually enhance the story and enhance both characters? And more importantly than that, how is their relationship? How is the chemistry when we see these two characters? When we see them on screen together, do we find ourselves wanting them to be an item? Do we find ourselves rolling our eyes? Do we find ourselves enjoying the romantic moments? These will all be factors that will determine who actually gets the top spot on this list. So without further ado, let's get into number 5, because coming in at number 5 on the list of Batman love interests in the DCAU, we have Zatanna. Yes, I know, you heard me right, it is Zatanna. So in this series, Zatanna is aged up, which is why I don't actually mind her being paired with Bruce Wayne in this universe. A lot of times she is paired with Nightwing because she's closer in age to Nightwing. However, in Batman the Animated Series, we quite literally see that when Bruce was training to become Batman and trying to master the art of escape, he was learning under Zatanna, the escape artist, and that is where he was able to meet Zatanna. So they did grow this friendship and grow this bond, this fondness for one another. However, unfortunately, Bruce did have to go once his training was complete, as his mission was still focused on becoming Batman, and he didn't really consider her a love interest at all. However, even that being said, their chemistry was absolutely great. Their interactions were absolutely perfect, especially in the flashbacks before he actually became Batman. And not only that, he is so ready to help her in the future when she is framed. And on top of that, during Justice League Unlimited, Zatanna is so willing to help Batman right away when he asks some pretty insane things just to help Wonder Woman. And one of these insane things was them quite literally going to the depths of Tartarus to talk to Medusa. Yeah, that's insane, and that's some level of commitment that, although doesn't prove they are a perfect relationship, and I know they didn't actually get confirmed to be a couple at any point, these are two characters that I absolutely wouldn't have had a problem if they did end up together on screen. However, considering their lack of screen time together and their lack of moments, I definitely understand why they didn't end up as a couple, and that is why Zatanna only gets our number 5 spot. However, that cannot all be said for our number 4 spot, because coming in at number 4 on the list of Batman love interests in the DCAU, we have Catwoman. Yes, I know, another shocker. Catwoman traditionally is most people's number 1 pick for who they want Batman to end up with, and a lot of times I think that is justified. I think the story and the universe that is constructed definitely justifies Batman being with Catwoman. However, the DCAU doesn't do that. The DCAU tells us that Catwoman not only isn't a good person for Batman, but she is a horrible person for Bruce Wayne. Their first interactions together is quite literally Selina Kyle manipulating Bruce Wayne multiple times to try to get him to help her with this nature preserve. She even has him at one point call up a CEO to try to get a meeting with him. And this entire time, Bruce is just doing it because he thinks Selina is cute. They have no actual chemistry. They have nothing in common. And almost every chance she gets, Selina Kyle decides to betray Batman. And no, this isn't for any great cause. It is just for her own selfishness. So she's just putting herself above her potential partner. And not only that, she continues to do bad things. We see her in the New Adventures of Batman, and by that point, it's been multiple years after she had gotten out of prison. And what is she doing? Still being a cat burglar. And it's so bad that she literally only gets Batman involved when she needs him. She doesn't have genuine care for him. And even if she does, it's always outweighed by her own selfishness. So that's why, to me, I realistically can't put her any higher on this list, because this relationship doesn't feel like it's organic. It doesn't feel like there's chemistry. And realistically, I would not want Bruce Wayne / Batman to end up with Catwoman in this universe. She, to me, is kind of a scumbag. And honestly, at one point, she even tries to manipulate Nightwing in a way, using the same tactics and methods that she used against Batman. So that just further proves why I really don't like this version of Catwoman ending up with Batman. If it were between him ending up with Catwoman and ending up alone, I am glad that he ended up alone, because because to me, she would just feel like the worst consolation prize because again, she was just absolutely horrible to him. And from his point of view, all he's ever done is arrested her over and over again. There is no sympathy like in the comics where he lets her go. Like in those storylines where he acknowledges all she's doing is burglarizing. She's not actually hurting people. No, in the end of their first actual interactions, he quite literally puts handcuffs on her and she goes to prison. So yeah, no, can't put this any higher than number 4 on this list. However, a lot of those complaints that I said are going to be present in my number 3 pick, but that being said, there is one crucial difference. But speaking of the number 3 entry on this list, let's get to it because coming in at number 3 on the list of Batman love interests in the DCAU, we have Talia al Ghul. Yes, I know Talia al Ghul definitely betrays Batman a lot. However, I 100% believe that she loves him. Their on-screen chemistry is there. The moments they have together are real. And she quite literally at one point states that she wants to marry him. When Ra's al Ghul wants Batman to take over the mantle of the demon's head, Ra's al Ghul even says that part of the reason he is so okay with Batman after testing him is because Talia loves him. And it's at that moment we literally pan over to Talia, and Talia does not deny this. She actually reaffirms this, showing Batman that she loves him, showing him that she truly cares about him. All she wants is to be his bride, to stand by his side and do whatever he needs her to do. So right there, I feel like we get a lot more romance and chemistry than we do from previous entries on this list. I feel like the only reason this isn't any higher is because she unfortunately does betray Batman multiple times. However, unlike with when Catwoman would betray Batman, these betrayals from Talia were all because of her dad, a loyalty she had for him. And we do eventually see where that loyalty gets her. Ra's al Ghul quite literally steals her body at one point, showing that all he ever truly cared about was his own self-preservation. And he was able to manipulate his daughter so much so that she chose him over Batman, the person she was truly in love with. However, even despite this, there are multiple times where her father probably wants her to kill Batman, especially after Batman refused Ra's al Ghul's offer. However, she doesn't do that. She never actually does anything violent against him. All she's ever done is pointed a gun at him in order to have her father freed. Anything else, there is no aggression from her towards Batman because she truly does love him. And we see this as a constant throughout the series. The only downside is we never really get any type of closure on this, as the next time we do see Talia after Batman the Animated Series, she has already been taken over by Ra's al Ghul, so she did unfortunately die off screen, which is a huge bummer. However, all that being said, she is still more deserving, in my opinion, of this number 3 spot. But that being said, she cannot surpass our number 2 entry on this list, because coming in at number 2 on the list of Batman love interests in the DCAU, we have Wonder Woman. Yeah, I know this list is probably making you flip out, and me putting Wonder Bat at number 2 is probably not helping with that. But hear me out. Normally, I do not like Wonder Bat. I am not a fan when they tried to put it in the comics. I was not a fan of it in the DCEU. However, in the DCAU, it is absolutely perfect. Their interactions could not be executed more beautifully. They are so subtle to the point where there are simple moments where Wonder Woman is trying to stop a missile. She ends up being able to do this, but is crushed by the debris. And as all the Justice League stands by looking in horror, wondering if they saw Wonder Woman just meet her demise, Batman decides to rush in and try to dig her out of all that rubble. The only person there with no superpowers, and he was the only one that was frantically digging her out. And while yes, he was not able to get her out of there, she is eventually able to just lift the missile off of herself. And they have a really subtle moment where everyone is acknowledging that she was okay, and Wonder Woman just looks to the side and sees Batman's gloves all dirty, and she deduces that Batman must have been really worried about her and was literally digging through the rocks just to ensure her safety. And it's at this moment we get a cute little moment where she smiles and gives him a kiss on the cheek. And in my opinion, small little moments like this that we continue to get throughout the series just highlight why this couple is so good. Even simple things like Bruce Wayne saving Diana when she's out and about from dancing with other men. She has this nice moment with him. They have a really nice dance. And later in the episode, Wonder Woman quite literally looks at Batman and says, "You know you still owe me a dance." And Batman only says, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about," because at this point, he still doesn't want to reveal his identity, not even to her. However, she realistically doesn't acknowledge this at all because she 100% knows that he is Bruce Wayne, and they do end up having a nice little dance together. They also share multiple kisses throughout this series, and they feel very organic. They don't feel forced at all. They have a funny moment in a restaurant where they only kiss because it's part of the disguise. However, after it happens and it was initiated by Wonder Woman, Batman quite quite literally says he's not complaining. He even says you don't need to apologize. And you can tell he enjoyed it. And you can also tell she enjoyed it as well. And as they progress through Justice League Unlimited, we just get even more moments for these two characters. We get moments where Batman is talking to Green Lantern about Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman walks up behind them and even mentions that Batman shouldn't stop, that Batman should keep talking about what he thinks of her. They have simple moments flying to Superman's Fortress of Solitude for his birthday, where they have little comedic moments that add to their chemistry. And probably my favorite moment for these two characters is their rooftop scene before she ends up getting transformed into a pig. Wonder Woman is quite literally discussing with Batman wanting to be down and part of the crowd, wanting to go out on dates, wanting to be with someone special. And she gets mad at him for not wanting that, for only wanting to be the Batman. And when Batman quite literally looks at her and simply says there are multiple reasons why I can't, and even lists those off, one of which being that she's an immortal princess and he's a rich kid with issues, lots of issues, not to mention the fact that he has enemies, and if any of those enemies discovered he had someone special, they would do anything to her just to get to him. And I absolutely love the moment where Wonder Woman disregards all of this and simply breaks a rock on the building they're standing on to solidify that she doesn't give a damn anyone that would come after her just for being with him. She is literally Wonder Woman and she would absolutely break him. And to me, the only reason I don't have this higher is because we don't actually get anything confirmed. We don't get any progression beyond these subtle moments, and it is one of my biggest negatives for the DCAU. That is a universe I often praise. However, I will admit that them confirming WonderBat would have made it even better in my opinion. However, that being said, we do also have some honorable mentions before we get to our #1 spot. So honorable mention #1, we have Kathy Duquesne from the Batman Mystery the Batwoman movie. Now, these two do have good chemistry. Their storyline fits pretty well with the movie. However, it just realistically goes nowhere. She never finds out he's Batman, and she doesn't do anything to realistically have him grow as a character or as a person. And it is just a plot device to get Batman more involved with Kathy Duquesne and her family to be able to investigate them. So I feel like that kind of disregards this as being a top on this list. And then some of our dishonorable mentions, we have Susan Wayne, the plant lady created by Poison Ivy that Batman almost married. That wasn't fun for anybody. However, speaking of not fun for anybody, we can't forget the time that Bruce Wayne literally dated Lois Lane, and it was absolutely horrible. I couldn't stand these two characters together. Bruce literally spent half of their date talking about Superman, to the point where Lois Lane even asks at one point if Bruce wants Lois to connect Bruce and Superman, because Bruce cannot shut his mouth about Superman. So he was only using this as a way to get more information about Superman. So yeah, not gonna like that at all. However, probably my least favorite relationship that Batman has in the DCAU is without a doubt with Barbara Gordon. I normally hate when these two characters are paired together. I just feel like it almost never fits in the context of the stories they are in. But it is even worse in this universe because it literally happens right after Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon were together. And in some continuities of the comics that are based around the DCAU universe, they end up having some type of cheating scandals that leads to some miscarriages and some other things. So yeah, all around, just really not a fan of Barbara Gordon being with Bruce Wayne. So that definitely gets my top spot on the dishonorable mentions, and it is the relationship that I absolutely hate the most in the DCAU, and honestly most of the time for Batman. But all that aside, now we have to go to our #1 slot on this list, and that's why coming in at #1 on the list of Batman love interests in the DCAU, we have Andrea Beaumont. Now, Andrea Beaumont does appear in Mask of the Phantasm, and she was an original character. She does not appear in the comics. However, her relationship and her story with Bruce Wayne and Batman are so absolutely perfect, to the point where every single time I watch that movie, I want them to end up together. I'm rooting for Bruce and Andrea to end up together. And Bruce goes so far as to actually propose to her, something he only did when he was brainwashed by the plant lady. So that already puts her a leg up on virtually everyone else on this list. However, to me, I think the thing that gives her the biggest advantage is the scene that we get from Bruce when he's talking to his parents in the cemetery. Right before he's going to propose, he needs to go to get his parents' approval. And that's because at this point, he doesn't want to be Batman anymore. And he says something incredibly profound. Not only does he not want to be Batman anymore, and not only does he simply want to give the police more money because now he thinks he might actually be happy, it's something he wasn't actually counting on. He even says it just doesn't hurt anymore. So he found someone that not only made him consider going back on the promise he made, going back on the promise to be Batman, but he actually met someone who diminished the pain of losing his parents, who diminished that damaged child that he was. And I honestly believe if Andrea had stayed, Batman wouldn't wouldn't have existed. I truly believe that Bruce would have never became Batman in that continuity. And while yes, I know that can't really happen because we definitely need a Batman in this universe, there wouldn't even be a show if he had decided to do that. I do also believe that if after she came back, even after she did take down multiple people because of her vendetta trying to avenge her father, I don't believe Batman would have turned her in. I think Batman would have stayed by her side. And as long as she just stopped, I think he would have been with her. And while I don't believe he would have given up being Batman by that point, I feel like he would have compromised some type of happy medium so he could have that happy life with her and balance it with being Batman. But I feel like this just highlights multiple differences that other characters didn't have. Even though he felt great affection for Talia and Catwoman, he still tried to stop them. And Catwoman he quite literally arrested. But in this scenario, I truly don't believe he'd be able to bring himself to arrest Andrea Beaumont. I think his love for her ran that deep because in his own words, she was the only one who actually diminished that pain. She was the only one that, even if for a couple of moments, actually made him forget of the damaged child that he truly is, of the loved ones he lost, of the love he'd never be able to feel. She was actually filling that void for him. So do I believe if she stopped killing people as the Phantasm, would she have ended up with Batman? Yes, absolutely. And although yes, he would have continued being Batman, I do feel like they could have made it work, especially considering the fact that she was so incredibly skilled as the Phantasm. Maybe she could become an anti-hero or become part of the Bat family. That would have been pretty epic. I mean, imagine that character design standing side by side with Batman, bringing down justice and vengeance against the criminals of Gotham. Yeah, if you were terrified of Batman, just imagine when you see the Phantasm right behind him as well, who can literally make a bunch of smoke and then just appear within it. So yeah, absolutely would love that. And it's for all those reasons that I do have her at number 1 on this list. But unfortunately, this version of Batman does not get a happy ending. We do see his ultimate fate in Batman Beyond. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. What do you think of my ranking? Who do you think is the best love interest for Batman in the DCAU? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.